Hey guys, and welcome to Money Talks News, the podcast making you richer one day at a time. The great wealth transfer of trillions of dollars in assets, approximately $72.6 trillion over the next 20 years, has already started. Among those assets are inherited properties, but it's tough to figure out how to deal with the baggage that comes with an inherited house. Today we've got Pam Kruger here from Wealth Ramp. Hi, Pam.
Hi, Stacy. Hi, guys. Great to be here.
It's great to have you again. And you're going to talk about the most important questions you need to ask if you are going to inherit a house, or maybe if you already have inherited a house, or I guess if you're going to, is probably better. I inherited a house. Have you inherited, Pam?
I did. I did it. I'll tell you later. I did it wrong.
Oh, did you really?
So I know from firsthand, from experience, what not to do. Okay,
well, yeah. Because let's do this. This is about 5 questions you ask when you're going to inherit a house, or you could do this before or after, but probably before is better. So, what makes inheriting a house a tricky situation? Why do we even have to talk about it?
Property is so emotional, right? It's a little bit different than money. Everything with inheritance is pretty emotional, especially if there's, big family, you've got siblings and you've got a lot of people with vested interest, and someone you love is either going to pass away, you're anticipating that, or they have passed away. So there's just like a ton of emotion around it. But when you focus on the property and you focus on the house, especially the family house, mom's house or mom and dad's house, there's even more emotion attached to it because you probably grew up in that house. And, there's a zillion considerations you have to think about. It's not just an asset that you just turn around and sell, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. You're not going to shed a tear when you inherit a CD. But that house is, like you said, is where you grew up. So I guess make it more complicated. And because there's emotion involved, that can make you make bad decisions, huh?
Yeah, that's what we've got to try to pick through the minefield and kind of figure out what's the path forward here. And it's almost sacrilegious to think about it in advance because you feel guilty. Like, I don't want to think about that happening, but I kind of have to think about what happens if and what happens when. So that's kind of where a lot of people are at when they're thinking about, what am I going to inherit? What am I going to do if I inherit mom and dad's house?
So let's talk about that, because I'm actually picturing myself right now sitting at the kitchen table of my parents' old house, talking to them about these very things, because, I'm sure it's the same for you guys too, but you're sitting there with your parents and they go, we have to start talking about what's going to happen to this house when we're gone. And you go, what do you mean gone? You're not going anywhere, but there's no reason to talk about that. Right? That's what you do. But, my mom, put a sticker on something that you want, anything around the house that you want. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. Our relationship is not based on money.
Yeah, it's a sticky one because we have a couple friends that we know. One, her father died, and obviously she had multiple siblings, and they were sticklers. Everybody wanted to divide up money, even this little car that wasn't worth anything. Next thing you know, she's like, well, I have to wash the car to sell the car. And the brother was like, I'm not paying for that washing. It's like the money became so important. And then we have this other set of friends where, the ones are out of state and the ones are right there. The father died. The mother needs to be taken care of. The one sister who lived close by swooped right in and started living with the mother. And the one that's out of state is going, what the F is going on? And they're another worried about, the other sister taking everything away. So it gets contentious.
Yeah, it sure can. I didn't have any of these issues. I have one sister, and we didn't have that many issues. But my wife's grandmother died, and they had a huge house that they all grew up, and they had five siblings, whatever, and it was not fun. They did not have a good time dividing the assets. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but anyway, it was pretty smooth for me. But so, what kind of so questions? What about mortgages? Does that matter if there's a mortgage on the house? I'm sure it does, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big questions, right? Like, we all kind of assume that our parents have paid off their house, but have they? And how is that going to fit in, right? Like, if you inherit this house, somebody either has to take over the mortgage, or you have to use an inheritance to pay off the mortgage. I mean, that all or you have to sell the house because you can't afford the mortgage, right?
And then that brings up another big family fight, because this is the asset that causes the big family fight. also touching on what you just mentioned, Stacey, you actually hit on a really important nerve, which is, I remember talking, do you guys remember Ben Stein? He's so wise.
Sure.
I just
Ben
loved
Stein's
him.
Money?
Yeah, I interviewed him on Money Track, that was on PBS. And I remember, I'll never forget, he told me, don't bring it up to your parents. Don't be the one to bring it up to your parents. Do not do that. Let your parents bring it up to you. And I thought about that a lot, meaning what I'm talking about is the conversation, the whole conversation about if, when. Because like you said, Stacey, that the parent brings it up and you're like, what? You're not going to die? But it's some adult children that I talk to who have aging parents that are really getting up there and they still live in the house. And now the aging kids are like, I have to bring it up. I have to somehow approach this topic with mom or dad or both and siblings without causing a big problem. It's really contentious. So say that, okay, your parent dies and let's say you're an only child and you're going to receive the house, but the person who owned the home, your parent, had a mortgage or, I know Miranda had mentioned something earlier when we were talking about reverse mortgages coming up as an example. And in those cases, sometimes people may not even realize that, but the heirs, whoever the heirs are, that's you, are subject to paying off whatever that debt is. That's a loan, plus the fees, plus the interest that's accrued. So, obviously selling the property and then using the proceeds to pay off the mortgage, or deciding you're going to keep the property if you can afford to, and then take out some kind of, forward mortgage, if you will, to pay off the old mortgage balance or the reverse mortgage balance if it is, or, pay off the mortgage and keep the property by using your own funds because you can afford to. I mean, those are your options.
Oh, Pam, here's something too. I just remembered this. My father had their house in his name alone, which was very odd. They were married, 60 years, But when it came time to start talking about this stuff, I found out he was on the deed by himself. And I said, that's crazy. Are you out of your mind? Because if my father dies first, then my mother would have to she'd have to get the house through probate. And that's just nuts. You want to have joint tenancy with rights of survivorship on a house that you're with your spouse. And he never did change it. As it happens, my mother died first, which was weird because my father was not nearly as healthy. So it didn't matter because then obviously my father already owned the house. But even just checking that might make sense. I have no explanation for why my father would have done that, but he did. So just checking, seeing how the house has titled, would make sense.
I think a lot of people, a lot of adult children are wondering, hey, it's going to be a much more direct transfer anyway. Why don't mom and dad, why don't you just put me on the deed to the house right now? And then that will just, transfer directly. And we don't have to worry about inheritance and all that. Well, that's a hard no, like almost all the time. And the reason is because there's a zillion reasons, but even the non-financial reasons for that are that suddenly, let's say that you're the parent and now you've just put your adult daughter on your deed to your house. Let's say that she gets a boyfriend all of a sudden, she has this new boyfriend and you don't really like him, and she marries this guy. And now these people now own your house with you. And they can make decisions about, I don't think you should I don't think you should remodel the house. No, this is what I want to do with the house, And not only that, but like you said, you're just completely giving away the whole benefit of inheritance. It has its benefits, because you've got that step-up provision, which we could talk about. But you're just totally giving it away by being added to the deed. I think it just causes a lot more problems than it solves on a number of levels for most people.
Let's talk about that stepped-up basis. Is this the right time to talk about that? That's really important,
well,
too.
Before we do that real quick, I do want to just touch on the reverse mortgage again really fast, just because, I had a friend who, in the last couple weeks, was having super stress because they had no idea there was a reverse mortgage on this house. And so when she passed, like all of a sudden, like we have this problem where there's a reverse mortgage, and you might have a limited amount of time once your parent passes to sell the house to pay off that reverse mortgage. And if the assets aren't readily available just to pay off that reverse mortgage, now you have to sell the house. You have to prepare to do it. You're in the middle of grieving. So I think it's really important to make sure that, yes, okay, not only is there a mortgage, but is there also a reverse mortgage? And is this going to come with requirements that are going to put extra stress once your parent passes?
Yeah, what a
Good
surprise, just to find that out. But, it's also important because now we're on the topic of kind of, okay, we're going to sell the house. Let's say you have inherited the house. Let's say you and your siblings have inherited the house. After you clear and find out, who else is owed money here, it's important to note that if you do sell a house and that you have inherited, you're going to owe the taxes when you sell the house. You're not going to owe the taxes when you inherit the property. A lot of people are worried about that. Oh, I'm going to have to pay these big taxes when I inherit. No, it's when you sell the house. So let's say that in Miranda's example, they pay off the $150,000 in the outstanding reverse mortgage fees and everything. Now you've got a house you're going to sell. It's an asset. And the IRS allows you to be able to step up the value at the date of death of that property so that, imagine that instead of, your parent bought the house when it was, $50,000 or something, and now it's $500,000, and you would have to pay tax on the difference and pay that gain. That's huge. I mean, that is like ridiculous. But you're going to benefit when you take advantage of the IRS's step-up rule, which means that same scenario, and your name was never on the deed, you inherited the property. You're going to inherit the property with a cost basis of $500,000. So if you sell that house immediately at market value, then you have a net zero tax, period, case closed. And that's why a lot of times it's a lot cleaner to sell the house in financial terms. If you're talking about money, does it make more sense to sell the house, right? The answer is yeah, it probably does. But in the real world, it's not what happens. Because, you've got siblings and you have other people who are involved. And then you've got that emotional attachment to the house again. And then you got to figure out, okay, well, if we're not going to sell the house, if we are going to sell the house, how are we going to split up the proceeds according to the documents, the will, the estate? And then, it's the question of if we are going to keep the house. And these are the choices you have to make. You've got to make all these, choices ahead of time about, what you're going to do when.
So how do you make those choices? Like I said, with me, it's just me and my sister, and we didn't really have a huge attachment to the house because my parents bought it relatively late. We were already in college. So we didn't really care that much about it. Easy decision. But what do you do when if you did grow up there and you've got 5 siblings and two of them want to keep the house, 2 of them want to sell the house, 1 of them wants to live in the house. What do you do?
How many people in my own life do I know who are going through this right now? And there's no simple answer, but it does kind of tie back to the legal will or the trust that outlines to the heirs, what are their entitlements? What are they going to get? What are the implications about inheriting the house? Let's just say that you have, 3 kids and one of your kids was there to take care of you and really put their life on hold, which is like a real world scenario case that I have with a friend of mine, where she put her whole life on hold. She's an attorney, everything to live with her mother and take care of her mother. So at the end of the day, equal parts. You're going to get this much when you sell the house or whatever you do with the house. This is going to be your portion, your share, and your share, the 3 of you. Equal wasn't fair because she was the one that did the disproportionate amount of work and helped out. So you got to go back
that would have to be spelled out in the will, though,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's why you got to go back to the actual document. But after you find out if there's an outstanding mortgage on the property, after you find out that it's free and clear, you can have a discussion with your siblings about buying them out. If you wish to continue to own the home, somebody has to do that because probably all siblings are not in the same financial position, possibly, to actually do it, and they may not want to. So they may want to be bought out. But again, if you are, you got to take full advantage of the fact that if you're going to sell the house, and you wait till later, and there is a gain, you are going to have to pay the as much as for an individual you can shelter, you can exclude as much as $250,000, just like your house if you sold it, or $500,000, if you're married. Same thing will apply there if you keep the house and then sell it later. But the other thing that people don't think about, especially here where I live on Cape Cod half the year, the upkeep for these houses that are near the ocean is crazy. And of course, with all these extreme weather events and everything, the upkeep and the maintenance and the ongoing expenses and the taxes. So you just have to look at how much the house is actually costing. And that's why I say that most people come to the conclusion it's an asset. We've got to detach from it and sell it.
What about this question? What about what your parents want? Like, in other words, let's say, now, if you ask my parents, do you mind if we sell the house after you're gone? They'd say, I'll be dead. What do I care? But some people might not feel that way. They might say, this house means a lot to me. It's been in our house. It's been in our family for generations, and I don't want you to sell it. Now, and what if they just say that to you at the kitchen table? And then the next thing, your graveside with 4 of your siblings, and you say, well, Mom told me this. Well, Mom, she didn't tell me that. I mean, I could just imagine any number of ways you can get to a can of worms with a situation.
Yeah, this is where you have to talk to the parents. This is where the parents have to talk to you about being super clear about what they want, what their intentions are, and what they want to have happen and why. The earlier that they can have that conversation, the better. So if we're talking to the parents right now, my message to the parent would be to do your whole family a big favor. And not only talk about the house, not only talk about the inheritances, but really open that dialogue about, look, it's getting to that point in life where we all should talk about what, we want as parents for ourselves and for our assets and what we're thinking and our rationale and how we're thinking about this, to start to open up the dialogue toward, having a power of attorney designated for healthcare proxy. This is all part of that bigger conversation about estate planning. And that's just huge. I mean, inheriting the house is just part of estate planning.
I was just going to ask you this, Pam. Would you go to, let's say we're in this scenario where, it's a can of worms. We can't decide what we want to do. Everyone's arguing, blah, blah, blah. Is this where you would turn to a professional for guidance and advice?
Every situation
the lawyer
is
who drew up the will or whatever.
Every situation is so sensitive. But if I'm talking to the parent who hasn't done this yet, and I'm saying, yes, go and sit down with an estate planning attorney, decide if you want to have a trust or a simple will. Depends on, best how complex your situation is. And start thinking about how you're going to communicate your intentions to the next generation. Because I promise you, if you don't do it, the kids will not work it out later. It creates really, really, it can create the end of relationships as you've known them, because your kids have to interpret whatever they thought you wanted. And one kid is going to say you wanted one thing, and the other is going to say you intended something else. And that is the beginning of a big breakup of a family right there.
Yeah, it's intense. What would you advise people listening? I got very clearly, I got the advice on what to do if you're the person who's going to be doing the bequesting. In other words, if you're the parent, you need to put your ducks in a row and let your kids know what your thoughts are. But if you're the kid and you've got older parents, what's your advice there? Because you said earlier, Pam, that Ben Stein said, "Don't ever approach your parents. Wait till they approach you." And by the way, you did a really good imitation of him too. But do you adhere to that advice, or would you advise people to go and talk to their parents? When their parents are in their late 70s or whatever age, would you advise that conversation to occur?
Yeah, I can't 100% agree with. I think I agree with Ben Stein up to the point where you're starting to see your parents maybe decline cognitively. And you're starting to see the little slippage. Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say, isn't his whole idea is like, wait till your sibling brings it up so you're not the one? No, but we do have a great episode with Cameron Huddleston, the author of Mom and Dad.
I love Cameron. I love her.
So we have a great episode, and we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. But we have a great episode with Cameron Huddleston about her book and her advice on like, okay, here's what you can do. Here's how you do it if you are hoping to have that, broach that conversation. So I think that's definitely something to go back and look at. But yeah, in the end, like you kind of do like, and if you have a good relationship with your siblings, so one of the things that I did with my brother, so I have 4 siblings, but let's be honest, my lawyer brother and I are like, my brother, who's the lawyer, and I are the ones that are like taking the lead in just about everything. And so he and I just kind of touch base with each other every now and again. And we're like, okay, what things do we need to talk to Mom and Dad about the next time we're all sharing space? And so we kind of do it together. And we do it kind of in a very professional kind of way. We're lucky in that like he can do it from the lawyer standpoint. I can do it from the finance standpoint. And we just kind of both like do it together in a very non-confrontational, hey, like we just want to touch base on like what's going on, where we're at, what you guys want to do, what are your plans, how are we going to make it happen, and we try and be super casual about it as we go about it. But I know that's not going to work for everybody because not everybody has good relationships with their siblings.
Yeah, or their parents.
Yeah,
even.
And as the time gets closer and closer, it becomes a little bit more serious. So remember back in the beginning, I said I did it wrong. Well, I did it wrong because I'm the youngest in my family and I was the closest to my parents. And it just wound up that my parents wanted me on the deed. And so that's what we did. And then, of course, when my mom passed away, years and years and years and years later, that's how I found out the hard way. Like, oh my God, this is the difference between the purchase price and today's market value. And I would have done so much better not doing that. And it created a little bit of a problem with me having to explain to my siblings, well, how'd that happen?
Did your siblings know that they had done that? No. Oh man.
No. But in my family, thank God, there wasn't a lot of resentment because everybody knew that, I spent a lot more time, if you will, and a lot more, without getting into the details with my parents. And so everybody kind of understood it. But what I did do when I sold the house was I said, you guys go. You go and choose and pick everything that means anything to you. I will just wait. I will stand back and not do anything or take any furniture or any silver, nothing. You guys all do that first. Everybody's fine. Everybody was fine now. But that's what I mean. That wasn't done right. That wasn't done properly. It wasn't smart. A smarter thing would have just been that, they would have been angry that I would have inherited the house, let's say. But at least I wouldn't have had the big difference in the capital gains between the,
So because you were on the deed, you had to treat that as a regular capital gain versus
the cost
stepped up basis
was the same.
I did not know that.
That's financially. Now we've got 2 conversations. We've got the financial conversation for just purely the money side of it. And then you've got how do you deal with your family side of it when it comes to estate planning and, inheriting property.
Interesting. Well, now we have learned something too, though, that Miranda and her lawyer sibling will come to your house and talk to your parents for you.
Actually, sure. Yeah, sure. 100%. You're going to have to pay us though.
No.
This is my new side gig. My new side gig
You can take that show on the road.
You can have my brother and myself come talk to you about family estate planning and legal issues. If you pay us, we can be all right. So Pam is going to add us to Wealth Ramp, and we've got this. We've got this figured out. Yeah.
And by the way, folks, if you are looking for help, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to give Pam a plug. If you are looking for help with financial management, to get an investment advisor or anything else to do financial planning, this is what she does for a living. She owns Wealth Ramp, and what Wealth Ramp does is connect you with qualified, vetted professionals in your area, right, Pam?
Fee-only fiduciary advisors who I personally vet and do so very rigorously and continue to monitor. Yes.
So you've got Pam to help you find help, outside help, and then you've got Miranda and her brother to come over and talk to your parents for you. So we got every base covered here, I think. Okay, folks, we are out of time, but we're never out of topic. Dig a little deeper. You're going to find links to lots more info in our show notes. And remember, this isn't financial advice, so make sure to do your own research and consult your own experts before acting on anything you may have heard on this podcast. We are not lawyers. We are super bright and very good looking, but not lawyers. So do be careful and get your own advice before you make any moves. And remember, if your goal is to make more, to spend less, to retire rich, your online home is moneytalksnews.com. Don't forget to check out Miranda's online home as well. That's Miranda Marquit, MARQUIT.com. You can make your travel plans with her. And don't forget to check out Pam's website. I just said, I'll say it again, wealthramp.com. If you've got a question or comment, topic you'd like to suggest, please tell us about it. You can email us at hello@moneytalksnews.com. And by the way, if you like this podcast, do something for us. Like it, share it, do whatever you need to do to make us more money, because we're starving over here. Okay, I am Stacy Johnson.
I'm Miranda Marquit.
I'm Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Pam Kruger.
Good job.